Hi everyone, welcome to Gig Lessons number 2. My name is Anthony Dittman with Kilowatt Events, and we've taken this time during COVID to not only educate ourselves, but educate our clients on a variety of categories that surround the business of events. Today we want to talk about content distribution, and we have Kemp Curley with Transition Productions. If you don't mind giving us a quick introduction, we'd love to hear about you.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Transition Productions, we started in 1998. We started in New York City. After 10 years in New York, migrated out to Southern California, San Diego, and Los Angeles, and really have just been part of a full-service production company. Putting on simulcasting events is probably one of the bigger things we're doing these days, basically knowing that our content's going to be across multiple platforms. And with that comes a lot of different moving parts on how each platform's a little bit different. As well as doing the bigger, large live events. We do a lot of branded content, commercial content, and then we do episodic series for networks as well, mainly in the competition reality or documentary follow-doc space.
So it seems like only 4 or 5 years ago we were talking about putting our shows for our clients on the big 4 networks and a handful of cable companies, ESPN included. A lot has changed. So what is the current state of affairs with content distribution, including linear and OTT, aka streaming, and what is it currently and what does the future look like?
Man, a lot has changed. I mean, I think when you think about where we've been and where we are now and where we're headed, everything's in a state of transition. And it's been interesting to watch. Streaming services have really come on strong, really become probably the most powerful juggernaut in the distribution landscape. If you look at the pillars of content, the major linear players, NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, TNT, TBS, they're shifting more focus on streaming platforms right now. They're trying to understand how to stay relevant on linear because a lot of traditional advertisers are there and they want viewership across linear platforms, but how to get into the streaming game in a meaningful way. The biggest difference being we're all trying to track the same thing, watch hours, right? It's all about how many people are watching the content, on what platform, and when they're there, how long are they watching for?
Sure.
It's kind of one of the first questions we work with a new client or anybody and say, well, what are your goals and where do you want to be? What's also been interesting is the breakdown of the demographics. Age groups is always a big thing when it comes to content distribution. You're trying to appeal to, 16 to 24, 18 to 35, 35 to 55. And that demographic and how they consume content has always followed a pretty relatable pattern, a pattern that we can all understand. That's all starting to get really blurred as well now. So much content is accessible for so many different groups that it's almost like you're protecting one age group while you're focusing on another, right? Mm-hmm. So the landscape is constantly evolving, and it really just comes down to the type of audience you're trying to capture, what type of content you're making, and then having that conversation with somebody so you can be successful across those platforms.
How did it accelerate so fast? I think in the past you described it as the Netflix effect. Can you describe that a little bit?
I think the reason we saw this explosion when it comes to how many different places content lives is Netflix blew up and proved that a subscription model can be really lucrative. Mm-hmm. And when a subscription model is lucrative, it gets the eyeballs and it creates revenue for that streaming service to put out and solicit and create amazing content. So Netflix effect was basically saying if we put premium content on our network, the subscribers will come and we're going to create enough revenue to continue to feed the Netflix beast. And that windfall for them was so powerful that it really triggered everybody else to play catch up. Kind of caught a lot of what protected Holy Grail content like an HBO and a Showtime was doing with their strategy. And then it started to attack even the smaller niche content. Because what Netflix, it's good for kids, it's good for teenagers, it's good for baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, everybody's on Netflix and has their favorite show. So that diversity of content created more accessibility for everybody to find something that they wanted, something we never saw before. You know, you went to the channels that knew had your shows. You didn't go to a channel that had all the shows in the household, right? And that's really what Netflix capitalized on.
It's amazing that they don't do anything live. And all the other, even HBO does live boxing, for example. So it's incredible that they've stayed so powerful and have stuck to their guns and not done anything live.
It's really true, and you know, there's so much on Netflix. It's kind of hard to paraphrase what's really good there, but you know, amazing scripted content, really powerful documentaries, and when you have a lot of resources, money, you can hire the best in class. You can take chances. You can create breakout hits, and that's really what Netflix has been able to do. They've been able to invest back into their content in really meaningful ways. So therefore, the home runs are the home runs, and it doesn't scare them as much on the risky content. It's interesting why they've stayed away from live, because even their competition reality shows that they haven't really, I think, done an amazing job with. You know, they're willing to take risks and mimic certain content platforms at work. I wouldn't be surprised though, but you're right, they've definitely stayed away from the live.
So now let's get back to live events, right? So that we
Live
definitely want to
events.
talk about everything else except Netflix, essentially. But it's interesting to talk about Netflix and see how we got here. As you said, it was really a trigger. Should brands put their content on existing channels, or should they create their own channels?
I think that answer really is about volume. You know, if the brand wants to go and explore what an audience would deliver for a couple of events or a couple of marketing campaigns, I think you can go find great places with a lot of subscribers to go share that with. And they'd be happy to elevate, especially if it's the right platform, which is what you do your due diligence to go find. Subscribers and viewers that are the consumer you want to approach. I think there's a lot of places that would be happy to have your content
For free.
for free,
Yeah.
and then you would understand what type of audience your content. You can still be a title sponsor and a presenting sponsor. You can still brand it, but you're going to go someplace where subscribers already exist and they already expect a certain level of content to be coming out on a daily or a weekly basis. If you're a brand that really wants to dive into content creation and really wants to be putting out weekly content or multiple events a year, that's when I would look at, should subscribers and consumers start to get familiar with your own platforms. There really isn't a lot of barrier to entry on creating your own platform across a lot of the social media and digital spaces, a YouTube, a Facebook, a Twitter, and Instagram. You can put your content in those places and then figure out how to amplify and promote on one space to then create meaningful viewership across something like a YouTube and a Facebook. So it's really that exploration question of how much into the platform business do you want to get in building your own media site, or do you just have certain agendas that you don't want to take on the added, it's almost anxiety that you want to keep your channels relevant.
Sure.
You know, nobody wants a channel that only has 2 or 3 things on it a year. Once you drop those channels, you're going to feel the anxiety, and you really owe it to your subscribers to keep the content coming.
Yeah, and it's the magic formula of I can have my own channel, but I need to create enough content to keep that intriguing to the fan base. Or if I'm on somebody else's channel, then I have to break through the clutter of all the other properties that are on that channel,
Yeah,
potentially.
potentially.
Sure. So how is all this affecting the big 5 networks or the big 4 networks? When I think about a property like Thursday Night Football, who, and this is kind of an exclusivity question because it seems like that's an institution that's in decay. When you look at Thursday Night Football, at least last year, I think was on CBS, NFL Network, and Amazon. I mean, how did that come into reality?
I think the NFL's an interesting, discussion of probably the most powerful sports league, in the U.S., right? Contracts are worth big dollars that then funds the entire economy of the NFL, right? Over the years, people want to keep seeing growth, so they have to go to places to find new audiences. That's why something like the Thursday night game that doesn't have a tradition of Monday Night Football, or doesn't have the tradition of parking it in front of the traditional places I go to find it, it really becomes that, exploration. It's that product that the NFL can go learn from the data and find out what happens when I go into non-traditional spaces.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the NFL, they own the rights. They can put it anywhere they want. But really what they're doing is they're trying to find pockets of consumers and create new audiences. It's almost like what you would do with even a niche content play: skateboarding, snowboarding, surfing.
I'm sure a lot of our clients are thinking about what they would do, like maybe it's cooking or a
Right.
corporate event. Like,
For sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, right? Because all these media bundles are owned by such, big brothers and big sisters that own the platforms. There's an interesting battle going on right now with Comcast and NBC and Amazon. They're having a little bit of a turf war. So all of that is along these lines of the content you own and you're a rights holder for, where should it go for growth without going to your competitors' platforms?
Sure.
This is big picture stuff none of us really get to play in, but that's part of what's guiding some of these explorations. So to get back to this NFL, conversation, by going to Amazon, you really get the power also of the way Amazon and Amazon Prime work, where they can send everybody a notice and hit everybody's emails and send everybody some awareness that it's on the Amazon platform,
Yeah.
which is growth in marketing. Then when you see it move over to something like Twitch, which is a big, powerful behemoth on the global audience that is watching live content on Twitch. Twitch is owned by Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And Twitch is an example of an emerging platform for a very niche consumer that is so powerful now that they're trying to give their consumers other things to find out and discover and to keep them on their channel. So when you look at the NFL on Twitch, it's because Twitch wants their gamers to stay on Twitch and bring them the biggest marquee events. And we're going to see a lot of that exploration.
Sure.
The Olympics are going to follow that same pattern. The NFL is following that pattern. But it's really the adjustment on how you present the content. Sidecasting on Twitch is how a lot of the content gets elevated. They're taking the Thursday night game, they're adding Twitch influencers to become the announce team that over comment through their eyes what's interesting about that Thursday night game. So it's taking one big mega live event and creating a totally different interpretation that's more geared towards the traditional viewers that are on that platform.
Obviously, our clientele is not Thursday Night Football, nor is it March Madness. But let's take a second to look at March Madness. So, used to just be on CBS. Then it went on to CBS's variety of networks, which are probably under the Viacom umbrella, Real TV, some obscure cable channels, and they'd have like 4 games on at a time via the 4 different channels that they're on simultaneously. How does what's happening now change that? Do those obscure cable channels just kind of fall off the face of the earth and everything's on streaming now, and you actually have your own production truck, so to speak, where you can just click on your cursor and pick the game you want to watch over the internet?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And this is something that, we've been talking these big, Budweiser and the NFL. The power of where we are now is there's content and you're important for the things you like, and you'll find an audience. So, I went to Old Dominion University. An obscure basketball team was pretty good, and when they make the tournament, I don't care where they are, I want to watch the game.
Right.
And a team like that isn't going to make it to the CBS show, right?
Sure.
So really what you're doing is you're giving people access to the content that they're passionate about, and then your community is almost more focused, and your viewership and your second screen interactivity of like commenting and group chatting and talking to people while they're watching the game, that's really what's fun about being everywhere now and getting smaller. And the question becomes, I'll find that game. I'll find that live content, that sporting event that I want to watch, and my community will find it. We don't really care where it is anymore. If you want to find the content that might have a smaller development group to it, it's back to this thing that really we started Transition Productions on. We want to elevate the core and, transcend into the mainstream, right? We want to be able to take what we're doing to make sure our core group really loves it, but we want to transcend and get into the mainstream and penetrate them if the stories and if the actions are powerful enough. So all of this digital revolution and distribution revolution that we're in right now has really championed that. As a viewer, we love access, we love authenticity. So when you can get access to something that a group cherishes, which is kind of like this Reddit and Twitch nation, right? There's such a strong niche community that's into something very specific.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is being celebrated these days.
Yeah.
And that influence is now going back and influencing the type of content that even the major networks are trying to keep an eye on.
So on to streaming services.
Yep.
Naturally, if a brand chooses a platform to exist on, it needs to check the variety of boxes that need to be checked to align with their strategy.
Absolutely.
But what's your go-to? Like where do you initiate that process with a brand as you're counseling them how to amplify their property and their brand via creating this content, either their own content or sponsoring an existing live event, producing content from there? How do we decide where to go from there?
The first question you ask is, what's the demographic of the consumer you're looking for?
Right.
They all have different attributes on what excites them. They all have a different range of topics that they love. And really, we have enough data now to know where they live, what they respond to. That's always the first question.
Mm-hmm.
Some demographics can really appeal to an older group. History Channel, A&E Discovery, these are typically 55 and over, and in the last 18 months, they've been jump-starting their development to get younger, right?
Right.
It's an important adjustment.
Yeah.
Because those groups now have their streaming services that they're launching, and they're all trying to scale younger. Your younger demographic is pretty damn savvy, and they're on YouTube a lot for a lot of their content. Your Gen Xers are more or less on Facebook, right? Your Twitch is definitely your Gen Z and your Gen Y, your millennials, right? They're all living in those areas. And these funny buzzwords on the makeups of the different kind of like age groups, it's kind of an interesting Wikipedia search because it really does break them down for you, and you can understand how different age groups and demographics kind of have certain things that they traditionally do to consume. And really what we're looking at now is anybody under 40 has all grown up with all of this additional content on all of these different platforms. And as the younger demographics age, like on the Twitch model, where they consume content and how much time they consume content on certain platforms, they still are very hip to all the greatest shows. They all watch The Queen's Gambit. They all know where all the big live events are in Coachella and Street League and the WSL. They just watch them on different platforms. Transition Productions, we started in 1998, and we showed up with this kind of first wave of content being produced online on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And we've grown up with it. And when we think about the things that our company really does, music, sports, lifestyle, adventure content, and the live content that surrounds that, we've been on top of the platform development of YouTube, Facebook, Instagram Live, Periscope, Twitter, OTT, and then watching things like the X Games and the Dew Tours also balance their linear partners, their cable partners, and understanding how the mobile phone device has become a powerful screening device.
Right.
So we really have grown up over the last 20 years understanding a simulcast, which means we're across all these platforms, and what audience you're going to attract when you go there. And ultimately, it kind of goes down to those same ethos. Who's your core group? You want to make sure you're giving it to them where they are watching it. And how can we penetrate the mainstream? How can we penetrate new platforms if our content starts to pay attention to that? The key ingredient being is you have to slightly alter your output of your content based on your platform. What we're doing on NBC won't resonate the same way of what we're doing on Twitch. A YouTube show and a Facebook show, similar, But you really now, consumers and viewers are savvy enough that they want to be spoken to on the platforms that the way they enjoy it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
And it's so evident on platforms like Twitch, YouTube, and then linear TV that there is a completely different way of watching, especially the live content.
Right. Kemp, there's so much flexibility with programming now with the various platforms we've just discussed. And in the past, smaller events, we wouldn't consider putting them on air, live streaming, etc. It seems to me that now, by the time you bring in the production, whether you were doing it live or packaging it up, the ability to live stream something is a lot more accessible now. Is that fair to say?
The barrier to entry to put on and get a presence across the digital platforms is very small. $10,000, $20,000 can get you 2, 3, 4, 5 cameras, a video switch. You can stream across multiple platforms. Mm-hmm. And the question you ask, because especially during COVID, there's been a lot of on-site activations that had to go virtual.
Right.
And those groups that were traditionally doing live in-person event activations now had to pivot and make sure that the way they calculated their metrics for that event, well, what does it mean now when I have viewers and hours watched and concurrence? Because ultimately, you can put on those events and stream them, and then the viewership can tell you if it's a powerful tool to continue to use.
Right.
That's ultimately what you're going to get with a little bit of marketing, a little bit of awareness. You don't want to just go live without telegraphing it. You got to get a little social media buzz going. You got to get a little bit of a media buy going to make sure people know your event's going to have a live component. Mm-hmm. But you can definitely go explore the viewership. And then it'll be there for you to point people back to after your live event is over.
Almost in perpetuity.
In perpetuity, man.
Yeah,
it's,
sure.
it's the perfect handshake. Like anybody that's investing meaningful budget into putting on a live event should think about, is there a live extension that could be then distributed across different platforms? And that type of consultation is important because some events may not translate, but a lot of events can and will. And the right model and what all you want to do really just comes down to your goals for the project. If you've got a super premium event with really beautiful high-end set design and amazing hosts and amazing activations, make sure that you're matching the aesthetic or your ideals of the live event to the type of live stream you want to do. But you can also, there's a lot of people that'll stream things and protect it and private so that then they can decide later if they want to make it public.
Oh, right, sure.
So that's another strategy for somebody that's not sure if the event's going to translate. But we deploy 3, 4 people to events and do really fun, powerful live streaming events, especially if you're looking to attract a global audience.
So Kemp, how do companies keep track of all these platforms now to analyze and decide what platforms go on? You touched a little bit on that, but I'm just wondering, do you feel like these platforms are going to start merging? I mean, it's expanded so quickly, you have to assume there'll be some contraction in the future, and how would it work if I was a small sports league, say lacrosse, and I was on Flow Sports, and then Twitch ends up buying Flow Sports, and suddenly my league is on Twitch as a property owner or an event owner or a brand that's associated with an event. How does all that play out in reality and legally, for that matter?
Well, gosh, there's a lot to unpack there, Mr. Dittman. I think the thing to think about is, the value of a league, especially a startup league, and the rights, right? And how far you're willing for opportunity versus value. And a lot of us now put a lot of sweat equity into emerging concepts, and all of a sudden they can get extremely popular in a lot of different ways. And you're curious, like, did you sign your life away? Did you let this go out there and become something you can't control? The first step in any type of development is create awareness, I think. Mm-hmm. I think you want people to want your content. And if you take something like a new emerging sports league, so much of it is, can we get awareness to create value for it? And then we'll worry about the value once the kind of judge and jury have weighed in on, is our sport popular? And I see a lot of this, the question of, I don't want to do it until I raise enough money or I have enough sponsors to launch a new league or a new contest or a new live event. You know, I'm not going to do it unless I can go out and get the sponsorship to pay for it. Okay. So then the idea is based on having sponsorship to pay for it.
Right.
Right? Now you've got to ask yourself, did the expectations of my live event live up to what my sponsors wanted? Which is fine. That's also a great model. It can have a shelf life. It can create a lot of anxiety in the long term if the first go at something doesn't perform as well as you thought for a number of reasons. Didn't have enough of a marketing campaign, didn't have enough of a media awareness for anybody to find something new, right? Or you can go out and, you know, which is a lot of these YouTube and even these influencers, they go out and they create content and they just find communities that respond to it and pockets of individuals, and they just keep putting out the content. There's this balance of, don't be scared to put your content everywhere, and just be aware of the rights and who's holding on to the rights of it. Just because you streamed with somebody for free for one event or 10 events for 1 month or a year doesn't mean you still don't retain your rights to your content, and doesn't mean that you can't build up a proof of concept to create value to then move it forward to the next stage.
Right.
I think you're going to find platforms, the smaller ones, they're always going to be in flux. And I wouldn't say that consolidation or being bought out by a larger group is a bad thing, because ultimately they're just trying to consolidate to create more viewers and more subscribers to an
Broader
audience. Yeah, that's all they're doing. So I think all those things are good things. It's just the question of understanding the terms of the rights holding as they get bought and sold, so that you can renegotiate or be aware of new opportunities based on the value of your events or your leagues.
Sure. So all in all, we've run the gamut, but if a company just wants to promote their brand, you would essentially help them identify an event to create, you'd shoot it, you'd decide on the platform to put it on, and off it goes. You do a live stream and it sits on the channel in perpetuity. Like, that's really a bread and butter opportunity, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
You know, our company does a lot of consultation, does a lot of exploration. And I personally really enjoy that because it keeps me aware and ahead of trends that are moving forward and where we are. We want to know what people are up to and see where the trends are. And finding a place to stream content and to take your brand message or your event message out there is really what we do. And then comes the layers of how to execute, the type of content that could be powerful, how to best showcase your event or your brand, and then ultimately, you know, where it can go. What's the value of that brand, especially as it creates momentum. We do a lot of development at Transition Productions as well, where we're pitching networks big ideas, pitching them big, crazy live event stunt shows to the major networks. We're helping harnessing new competition leagues, and we're refining a lot of our customers that have been with us for a while and exploring new opportunities with them. So there's so much moving with the landscape. It's hard to say you're an expert in everything, but we now have a value to how long we've been doing it. So the trends to us and the platforms to us aren't that confusing anymore, but all we have to do is wait 6 months and there's a whole new agenda. The Twitch rabbit hole I've been in lately, I don't know if I'll still be in it in another 6 months, but I've really been trying to understand and how to crack that code. And there's just a lot of opportunities out there for brands, live events, media companies. There's a lot of opportunity is really how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're certainly looking forward to getting back out there. Thanks so much for your time. It's been very enlightening, and look forward to seeing you out on the asphalt with a couple cameras and a couple skateboards here soon.
Cool. Thank you, Anthony.
All right, Kim.
Cool.
Take care.